Hi everyone, and welcome to ForDiscovery's webinar, Predictions for 2021. I'm Will Riss with ForDiscovery, and we appreciate you joining us for this 60-minute presentation. Now to introduce our presenter, Chad Gough. Chad is the owner and founder of ForDiscovery, a B2B digital forensics firm headquartered in Chicago. Chad has 2 decades of experience successfully providing organizations and attorneys with digital forensics, information security, electronic discovery services. He is a renowned expert in digital forensics and has been retained as an expert in over 200 cases globally, leading to numerous convictions and settlements. He is a sought-out industry leader to speak at digital forensics conferences, as well as speaking at multiple conferences nationally. CNN has featured his work and expertise, and he serves as a technical consultant on the CBS television drama CSI Cyber. In his free time, Chad is an adjunct professor at DePaul University, where he teaches computer security and forensic investigations. Also to his credit, Chad has experienced the year 2020 firsthand. Chad, we'll hand the presentation over to you.
Thanks for the intro, Will, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Wanted to take some time and cover where we've been in 2020, some of the things that we've experienced and what we'll continue to experience in 2021. And we kind of developed these predictions over what we've been seeing and what we're forecasting to see in 2021. So thanks for joining us, and hope you'll find this informative. If you have any questions during this presentation, feel free to type them into the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll cover them after the presentation. So going through some of our predictions for 2021, state of affairs, what's changed? Obviously, a lot has changed between companies, corporations, and people working from home. Cover some of what's going on with the court systems and litigation. What this means for ESI, electronically stored information, and digital forensics. What we're seeing from an ESI standpoint and how it's being used. A lot of things that are going on regarding employee productivity and monitoring and contact tracing and unemployment. We'll have some takeaways and some time for some Q&A. So the state of affairs. Obviously 2020 was unprecedented. You know, if you looked in 2019 and you told me that we'd be walking around wearing masks and working from home, you would probably think that person was crazy. But here we are. We have lockdowns and stay-at-home orders. Courts are being closed. Businesses are being closed. We're all working from home. Caught a lot of businesses off guard. We've got new types of litigation that are spawning because of COVID. Lots of changes in the federal government, and the data revolution is really not slowing down. In fact, it's being adopted even faster. But in case you missed it, and if COVID wasn't enough, there's been a lot of other things that have happened throughout 2020. Brexit, national emergencies, brush fires, Harvey Weinstein being found guilty, the Tiger King show on Netflix, if anybody remembers that captured our attention for a good week or two. Murder hornets, a lot of protests and unrest within the country. Earthquakes, Twitter hacks, obviously Jeff Bezos is doing well. Amazon's doing great during COVID. He's the first person to have a net worth exceeding, $200 billion. We landed on an asteroid for the first time. That was news to me. I guess I missed that one as everything else was happening. And we have a new president. So there's lots of things going on, and we lost a lot of people along the way. It's been amazing for how many of these people we've lost in 2020. And David Prowse, Darth Vader, was actually the only one that was related to COVID from my list here. And I'm sure I'm missing a lot of people as well. So it's been a busy year. So what are my predictions for 2021? I'd love it if the COVID vaccine came out and was available worldwide for free, and businesses and everybody got to go back to work and things became normal again. And if we have a wish list, the economy is stimulated by all of us getting a mandatory 2-month vacation, whether that be with or without the people that you've been locked up at home with during this COVID lockdown. So, but in reality, that's not going to be the case. What has changed? A lot of businesses have had to reinvent themselves, whether it be producing different products than they were used to, providing services in different ways, or just basically managing through this pandemic. So a lot of businesses reinvented themselves just to kind of stay afloat, and some weren't able to do it, some closed. We've got a large work from home remote workforce, and that's causing corporations, especially litigation and what we do from a digital forensics standpoint, it's causing a lot of headaches we have to navigate through. We have this new definition of normal. But working from home, a lot of companies had to adapt quickly. We've talked to companies that just didn't have enough hardware or laptops for everybody when they had to send them home, and they were just saying, use whatever you can. If you have a home computer, that's good enough. A lot of companies didn't have the right technology. They didn't have the bandwidth, for example, to be able to have their entire workforce VPN and remote in. They didn't have the right technology for collaboration and being able to communicate with people remotely. Even just things as simple as having a license for Zoom or some other type of meeting software. We had to solve a lot of new client issues as well. How we interact with our clients, what we do for them. We had in-person learning. It's now moved to remote learning. A lot of businesses had to pivot there. And employees had to do a lot as well. We had to create physical workspaces to actually do our jobs at home. A lot of people weren't fortunate enough to be able to have a dedicated home office or a space for a home office. They had to make do. They've got their computers and laptops on the kitchen table. Lot of new technologies that had to be learned. I was amazed. I was doing a Zoom call with somebody the other day, and they still couldn't figure out how to turn on the video. I think you would have been at it for a while, but they're still struggling with a lot of this new technology. And we have to balance our work-home life now that it's actually merged together. We have kids that are doing remote learning that are taking up a lot of our time. All of our errands and everything else, it doesn't seem that work just starts and stops. There's no office for us to leave where we actually flip that switch. So it's created a lot of issues for employees as well. The result is that companies went from one office, maybe two, right, where they had their headquarters, to literally hundreds of offices. Everybody's home became a virtual office. The way that we manage people and productivity's changed. You aren't able to sort of stop by somebody's desk and ask them what's going on or see what they're doing or how they're progressing on something. It's a lot more complicated to do. So managing the employees and just their morale and their productivity is all taken a shift. We adapted a lot of new technology, and we just really weren't prepared for this. A lot of issues came out with respect to privacy and confidentiality, security, how we're securing everything. Wage and hour cases, are people getting breaks? How are they starting and stopping? If you're paying hourly employees, how is that working when they're actually at home? Very, very few companies had work from home policies and procedures, and we had to scramble to get those in place. A lot of productivity and communication and team meetings and collaboration all needed to change. We have health and safety issues. Just because someone's working from home doesn't mean that an employer got to basically slack off on their safe workplace environments. And again, office equipment and expenses. Some people didn't have monitors, keyboards, mouse, chairs, ergonomic places where they can sit for 8 to 10 hours a day and actually do their work. But we adapted. Improvise, adapt, overcome. We rolled out a lot of new software to help remote work and servicing clients, and we relied on the cloud for a lot of collaboration software. Purchased new equipment and technology quick, and we got some new vendors and partnerships. And these aren't going to go away. Even if things do go back to normal, employees are going to be reluctant to give a lot of this up. Companies are going to be reluctant to give a lot of this stuff up. So all of the things that we've adapted in a very, very short period of time, almost in like a knee-jerk reaction, are going to be around for a while. We're going to be forced to live with them. The courts and litigation. Zoom courts kind of becoming the norm. I've been doing a lot of Zoom depositions. I'm sure a lot of people have been doing status hearings and updates with the court as well over Zoom. But the courts are moving at a glacial pace. So simple things like discovery requests are taking a lot longer to turn around. And if you don't have an emergency motion, the chances are you've been pushed back. Trials have been pushed back. Hearings have been pushed back. Depositions have been pushed back. It's all being pushed out. And this impacts our ability to get results. And for attorneys and clients that are actually need the courts to resolve these matters so that they can be made whole again or they can resume work. This is dragging things out even further. Obviously, longer case times are more costs. And we're seeing increased risk for spoliation as well. It's taking longer to collect data, and we have new systems that we're not familiar with. We don't necessarily know what's there. So data's just been missing or it just goes away. So there's a lot of increased risk for spoliation. So what are some of the predictions for ESI and forensics and e-discovery? Even though a lot of companies are struggling, there are a lot of companies that are doing well, and a lot of people are moving. Postal Service said there was a 27% increase in address changes from February to July over 2019. A lot of people, now that they don't have to commute, are leaving high cost of living areas or leaving cities. Interest rates dropped incredibly low, and people were able to refinance, purchase additional homes, move. So there's been a lot of shift. People are saying, well, if I don't need to be in Chicago, for example, maybe I'm going to buy a house in Tennessee. And they've been shifting around. But there are businesses that are doing very well, and there's a lot of employees and people that are actively looking for new jobs, whether it be with a competitor that's doing well or changing industries. Actively or passively, there's a lot of people that are moving during this COVID crisis. And when people move, there's a risk for data to be lost, whether they walk out the door with it and keep it and use it at their new job, or whether it just simply gets deleted or gone in some way. There's a lot of data that's being lost and a lot of data that's just walking out the door when people are changing jobs. And it's becoming more difficult for businesses because they're being put in a situation where do I investigate and go after somebody for the theft of data if they've left and gone to a competitor, or do I have to sort of manage the budget and the limited funds that I have now? So it's, do I normally, companies would go after an employee for theft of data and working for a competitor and then maybe breaking an employment contract. Now they don't know if they want to spend the money to do that. Security risks are up as well. So these are increases over 2019 and for 2020. Social networking and phishing engineering scams are the top risk that companies are facing. And a lot of vulnerabilities from enterprise systems and from the equipment that we have at home and how we're actually starting to work and do our job and access data. All of these are bringing increased risks when it comes to data loss events. There is an insane amount of business email compromise going on right now. Checks are hard to process in a virtual world, so a lot of companies are moving to electronic payment systems. If the company's not moving to an electronic payment system, surely one of their vendors or somebody they rely on is moving to an electronic payment system. We're getting emails all the time. We're moving to an electronic payment system. You need to fill out this form with your new banking information. All of this is coming over electronically. And that's creating a huge risk because attackers are actually getting there first. I have invoices I need to process, but we're now only taking electronic payments now. So please fill out this information and wire it over. A lot of companies are losing money. We were working with one company that actually had their bank accounts frozen by the bank for fraudulent requests. And the bank was almost in a grateful mood because they froze the accounts and the company didn't lose any data. But the CEO was equally yelling at the bank saying, well, our accounts are frozen. We can't access our funds either. So now we can't pay our employees because you have our money locked down. So it's kind of a catch-22 there when it comes to employees and banks. But there's a lot of theft and fraud going on right now, and it's going to continue. And our home offices, where everybody's working, are almost impossible to secure. Corporations have spent years standardizing on equipment, putting protections in place, making their corporate networks very, very secure. And we've heard for years, right, all the risks associated with using your laptop at a Starbucks, for example. Now everybody's home office is essentially a Starbucks. all of your corporate assets are sitting next to the laptops that your children and kids are using for school and playing games on. They're sitting next to that weird internet-enabled crock pot that you received last year for Christmas. And a lot of the devices that we have at home aren't necessarily secured. There was just an article where a large amount of Walmart routers that were sold on Amazon and eBay as well had backdoors that were actually being exploited, where anybody can basically take control of your router and manipulate and manage the traffic and get on your network. Most people, when they have their home internet installed, it's done by some technician that's hooking up your internet, and they do it all for you, and you have a little black box somewhere. And the only way that you know that that's there, that when that exists, is when your internet goes down. You unplug it and plug it back in again to make your internet work. Those aren't being updated. There's a lot of devices on networks that aren't being updated. They're creating security risks. So corporate data is just intermingled, and corporate devices are intermingled with a lot of other devices that are at home now that are just outside of the reach of corporate IT, and they're impossible to secure. And as I mentioned, the cloud's playing a lot bigger role. We've got a lot more cloud connected applications and software solutions, and each one of these is creating their own little unique data set and their own pieces of data, because we're using them, we're creating and storing and collaborating on information using the cloud. And a lot of this technology has been recently rolled out, so it's new to a lot of people, and it's creating a bunch of data that we may or may not know about. And the other thing that's happening with the cloud is when you have a cloud platform, you can access it from anywhere. So it's not just the corporate computer that can log on to your cloud platform now. It's the home computer that they have. It's their iPad, it's their phone, it's their kid's computer. So a lot of other devices are being used to access corporate information because it's just in the cloud. All you need is a web browser, username and password, and you can log on. And a lot of companies are starting to use technology that they need or want, whether the company supports it or not. So people need to collaborate on files. The company may not have provided something, so they're starting to use personal Dropbox accounts, personal OneDrive accounts, iCloud, whatever they can find, whatever the new cool technology is, they're starting to adopt and use this, whether the employers are actually sanctioning it or whether it's supported by the enterprise. A lot of the custodial interviews that have happened recently related to where's your data, what do you use, ends up with, well, yeah, actually I do have a Dropbox account. And the company's like, well, we don't use Dropbox. Why do you have Dropbox installed? Well, I'm sharing files. I've got them in iCloud. I'm storing them in different programs. I'm moving them between my phone and my iPad and my tablets and my home computer and my corporate computer. So there's data that's everywhere that may be in technologies that corporations just don't understand. And as a result of us collaborating and working from home, we're actually creating a lot more data. We're creating more documents and data and notes and everything else than we did in prior years. It's because of the mobile device uses, Internet of Things, cloud accounts, and be prepared to collect, review, and produce from systems that you've never seen before. And these new platforms have new challenges. Because we adopted them so quick, almost all companies adopted some new technology stack in 2020 to help with remote work. Litigation holds, legal holds, security, compliance were all kind of a second thought for a lot of companies. They just needed to continue to work and keep their employees engaged. So a lot of companies are unsure how to preserve and collect from this new technology, and they didn't do a lot of due diligence before they purchased it. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction. They also didn't update their own internal policies and procedures when they adopted the new cloud technology. So, a lot of companies had backup and retention policies and plans, and the new cloud technology may not have supported that, so those just weren't being updated. So a lot of the policies and procedures are out of date as well. So you can't rely on those. If you're asking for how long does a company retain certain information, that's probably not true right now. Their documentation is definitely going to be out of date. Mobile forensics is increasing. We're using our phones a ton. Conference calls, one-on-one calls. Really, phone calls are the only way to get a hold of people these days and talk to them in real time. And this communication data is going to become more and more important. It's stored on phones, and they may be personal devices. They're not managed by a company, so there might not be mobile device management on there where they're keeping track of what's being installed. So a lot of communications, a lot of location data, and a lot of other relevant information is being created and stored on mobile devices. Each one of these creates its own unique challenge to preserve and examine. But remote collections are going to be the norm. So if you do need to collect data from a custodian, we're typically doing it remotely, either by connecting to a computer and remote controlling it, utilizing the cloud. Some of the documents may be stored in the cloud, but not everything. So it's not just the computer that's something we can collect and have access to everything now. It's the computer plus some additional cloud storage devices or other technologies. And the remote collections are faster. It's actually kind of nice for a lot of custodians because we just ship them something, they plug it in, we do a collection, and they ship it back. And they're not inconvenienced with having their 9-to-5 day jobs interrupted. You know, it can be done on nights, evenings, and weekends. And they prefer this socially distanced collection option as opposed to needing to bring phones and computers to the office, have them collected during business hours, and they have downtime and they're without their devices and technology. But it is putting attorneys at a disadvantage. Understanding all this new technology will give you a leg up. It's going to be difficult to do. But it impacts all the different phases of discovery, from preservation to collection to filtering and analyzing and reviewing and producing. And again, spoliation is up. It's harder to collect these new data sources. They may not be familiar with them, and there's a lot of data sources that are being used and new technology that are being used by companies that just simply don't fit well in the model of typical corporate environments anymore. So all those standard protocols and templates that you've used to request data probably in some way need to be updated to reflect this new technology. And again, logs don't exist in the cloud forever. There's not a magic button you can say to put a litigation hold on a Dropbox account, for example, or prevent information from being deleted or moved or archived or modified in some way. So a lot of these cloud storage just don't have the proper means to do litigation holds and easy collection. So data's been changing, and while data changes during that time, you risk losing it. Litigation in the court systems, obviously as attorneys you know that there's a huge backlog. Everything's been pushed out. A lot of things are remote, a lot of Zoom sessions. I've talked with law enforcement as well that, you know, even on the criminal side of things, that's moving very slow. There's an increase in liability cases, and we'll talk about those. And there's a lot of new contract litigation that's out there due to COVID as well, and family law. It seems that, you know, spending 24 hours a day with your children and spouse doesn't work for everybody. So, you know, divorces are definitely on the rise, and there's a lot of family law issues that are coming out of this. These longer case times lead to more costs. Discovery increases. There's more sources where ESI exists now. If you're collecting data and you're hosting it, and you're paying like a monthly fee, you typically would think you would only need that data up there for a few months while it gets reviewed and produced. But with the courts dragging on and times becoming longer and longer, we're hosting for a longer period of time, and that's driving up some costs. So storage and retention increase, you know, as we keep that data for longer periods of time. Again, I mentioned litigation holds are going to expand. Very rarely are we just doing a computer now. There's always some cloud account, whether it be email, storage, invoicing, payments, they're all cloud-based now, and there's no central repository to just get access to all the data that you need for discovery and for your case. So you have to identify and plan for these, and make sure you widen the scope when making these requests, and make sure that you know you got everything. One of the difficult things is, well, I preserved the computer and I searched it for certain documents and I produced them all to you, and you may receive these and think you have everything because a year ago that may have been the case. But with all the new cloud technology, there may be buckets of information that just simply don't exist. Again, there is more information that's out there, and the cloud accounts have actually created new points and new data sets for us. To the extent that they're still available and they haven't rolled over, cloud accounts have a lot of audit and activity logs. Smartsheet was a new one. Smartsheet's like a document collaboration platform. I've heard of it, wasn't very familiar with it, but these days a lot of companies have moved to this for collaboration on documents and information. So we've started to have to collect from this, and it's non-standard. It's not just as simple as grabbing Excel spreadsheets out of a Google Drive or a Dropbox account. And these communication platforms log a lot of messages too. Sharing documents outside of a company or organization to maybe a personal account. Modifying things, changing things. You have a much, much richer audit log with a lot of these communication platforms now than we did in the past. So that might be information that you're interested in. When was this document created? How many times was it modified? Over what period of time? Can you get all of the versions? Has it been shared with anybody? Has it been accessed from any other devices or computers? All things that the cloud can tell you that we might not get from just a standard computer where a document may have been emailed to somebody else. Digital contracts are on the rise. We're electronically signing things. We're seeing more and more cases where we're getting documents and asking to authenticate them. It's pretty easy to copy and paste a signature from one document to another document. If you're not using an electronic signature service like PandaDocs or DocuSign, if you're just sort of taking a document and dragging a signature onto it and saving the PDF or signing it electronically in some way, that doesn't keep a very good record. And a lot of documents are being forged. It's copy and pasting signatures between different documents. The documents are being modified. When the documents and contracts are signed are all playing a role in this. Contact tracing is gaining traction as well. So our phones and all these cloud-based services have a ton of information about us relating to what we're doing, who we're communicating with, and also locations, where we are. Leveraging this technology can help and save time. So if you have a case where somebody possibly has gotten COVID and you don't know where they were, mobile devices can help because we never leave the house without our phone, and we have location information on those mobile devices, and we can recreate someone's steps from a location standpoint, figure out when they were home, when they were behind a computer, and when they were out moving around, or maybe working from a relative's house or a friend's house, or maybe they traveled to work remotely in a better state or climate. All of that log information can tell where people are and how they're moving. So that's been helpful with contact tracing cases. And COVID fatigue is a real thing. People aren't having the interaction that they're used to, and the interaction we are having, the quality of that's not what it once was. And it's tiring everybody out, and people are getting fatigued, and it's causing some parties to be more contentious. Not agreeing to protocols and paths. It's adding a lot of fuel to the fire. So it's starting to become an issue with COVID fatigue. So some of the predictions for working from home. Obviously, with all this new technology, the data is going to be decentralized. All these new systems create new data silos that have different information with different audit logs and different records and different types of documents. And employees are moving between systems. Even though they may have been provided a corporate laptop, they may use that for part of the day and then may sit at their home desk and use their Mac for a while. Then they may send some emails later at night from an iPad or a tablet, or do some additional work from another device. They may travel in a limited sense, at least, and use another device somewhere else. So all of these data repositories are out there. They're kind of difficult to manage, and your data is everywhere. Work from home is a nightmare for micromanagers. If you have that boss, or we're one of those bosses that likes to check in on a frequent basis to check on the progress of a project or something that somebody's working on, you can't do that as frequently in a work from home scenario. So employees are going unsupervised a lot of the time. And employers are kind of questioning whether or not they have a right to investigate their productivity, or in some cases, actually put software on their computers at home to monitor their keystrokes to figure out what they're doing. And a lot of employees just don't want to return to the office, even if in 2021 we all get the chance to come back to work. A lot of employees don't want to. They're not missing their hour-long commute stuck in traffic. They believe they're more productive at home, where employers might be seeing a productivity drop. So you're going to have some pushback from employees that aren't going to want to return to the office as well. And there's a lot of work from home wage fraud. Employees are distracted. They're looking for new work. There was a book that was written probably a decade ago called The 4-Hour Work Week. That's being sold like crazy this year, where people are trying to basically life hack their way into their jobs. Tons of posts on the internet related to employees that have nothing to do, or look for ways to keep their boss thinking they're engaged when they're not. Again, we mentioned non-standard applications. If your employer or a company doesn't provide a tool that someone needs to do their job, they're going to go out and find it. They're unsupervised at this point in time, and they have multiple devices at home that they can use this information on. So bring your own devices, whether BYOD is meaning a personal iPad, a personal phone, a home computer, the kid's computer, whatever that may be. There's a lot of devices that are not being owned and maintained by corporations, and they have varying levels of security. The cloud is starting to monitor. So as a lot of people have moved to the cloud, these cloud providers have started to provide information that we didn't have a year ago related to actual employee monitoring. Microsoft has recently come out with Office 365 and released a productivity tool, which actually ranks employees based on how many emails they send and how many messages they're responding to, and whether or not they're including or commenting or modifying documents. There's been a lot of backlash related to that. Slack has a lot of reporting now to let you know when people are talking, on what days of the week, in public channels, if they're private messaging with each other as opposed to talking in group chat channels where the team can work. All of these are being monitored, and we have a lot of data and analytics regarding employee usage of cloud applications that we didn't have a year ago. Some of these new features we didn't necessarily ask for. And they could violate some privacy and existing agreements that are in place. A lot of our remote work is creating some new digital breadcrumbs that we didn't have a year or two ago. So since we're relying on technology to do your day-to-day job, you're basically in front of a computer using some piece of technology from the time you sign on until the time you shut down for the day. All of these new technology stacks that we're using are creating digital breadcrumbs of our activity. So it used to be that people had meetings and they were meeting face-to-face in conference rooms, and now they're meeting on Zoom. And sure enough, if you're using Zoom, it's an electronic piece of software. It's leaving behind logs of when you're in meetings, for how long you're in meetings, if you've dropped out. All of the chat programs we're using for communication are creating logs now. So it's actually possible to basically create an entire forensic timeline of someone's day, from when you've powered on your computer to log on, to use applications and go into meetings and web browsing, emails, chats, virtual meetings, all the way to when your screensaver comes on, or you lock the computer and you go to lunch, and when you shut down for the day. All of that activity can be put back together in a timeline to get a good idea for what employees are doing. On the corporate side of the predictions, again, a lot of company data is going to be exposed. Cyber attacks are on the rise. They're a lot harder to respond to with the remote IT workforce, and the attackers know this. We're having a lot of employee turnover. It's harder to onboard and offboard employees or maintain or manage their security when they're just not in the office. So data breaches, lapse of security, not being able to install updates to our environment, not being able to have the latest antivirus and security patches, all of these are going to impact the security of your data and your corporate environment throughout the year. And unemployment fraud's at an all-time high as well. So there's a lot of people out there that are fraudulently filing for unemployment, either by the individual or someone's doing it on their behalf. And California is posting that they're expecting $2 billion in fraudulent unemployment claims this year, which is a lot. And it's hard to manage for companies. There's been a lot of contract breaches, and those will continue to increase. Whether it be financial fraud, insurance-related fraud, companies failing to meet deadlines or deliverables. A lot of companies just can't get their materials together and production materials together. And if they had a contract for 10,000 units of something, they're only delivering 4,000, or they're late on a project in some way. A lot of employee issues related to working from home. Class actions on the rise, especially consumer protection. So companies not protecting us, and the products that we use not necessarily protecting us in this current environment. And a lot of this is impacting smaller companies. So the company size by number of employees, I was kind of shocked to see it tier towards the smaller companies as well. So all of these are on the rise. The employee churn with employees moving are going to hurt employers. It's a lot of your data is walking out the door, but it's not just your data, it's your knowledge. Hiring new people, onboarding them, training them are all going to be a lot more difficult in a virtual world. And we're going to lose a lot of talent, and it's going to hurt companies. And a lot of this data can be leveraged by other firms and competitors as well. Since we're monitoring, there's going to be a backlash to this. As companies become more concerned with productivity and security, we're going to have another knee-jerk reaction where we're going to start rolling out security controls and monitoring that are going to be put in place to do this. And employees are going to figure out a way to game the system. I was talking with my sister who is working remotely, and she will get a phone call on her phone if her little chat icon goes red, meaning she's away. So if she steps away from the computer for a while, the chat application that her company uses will actually say that you're away from your keyboard, and it will go red. And if managers are seeing red icons, they think that people aren't in front of their computers and aren't working, so they're getting phone calls. You can actually buy little mouse jigglers. You just plug into the computer and it just jiggles your mouse and it keeps it awake to keep your green light on all the time. People are using emails as a send later functionality. So, they'll batch email, maybe write 15, 20 email messages and say use send later to make it look like they're sending emails that are being sent throughout the day. So they may work for a few hours in the morning, batch their emails to come out throughout the day, and then just go do something else. So employers are going to continue to game this system and look for ways to sandbag the productivity that employers are trying to implement. So some takeaways. Obviously, we need to continue to adapt. 2021 is not going to be the big surprise that 2020 was, but we're still going to need to pivot to catch up with all of the changes that we made in 2020. So play the long game. You need to set up the organizations and your plans for success. Understand the landscape, understand what changes companies have made in 2020 and how that may impact litigation, data, privacy, and their workforce. And as all this change, stay up to date. Again, companies don't have a limited set of technology anymore. That article I posted regarding the Walmart routers that are vulnerable, typically an employer wouldn't care about that. They're not buying Walmart routers to use in their corporate environment, but now they're installed in the homes of all their employees, and it is becoming a security issue. So it's going to be difficult to stay up to date on a lot of the new technology and vulnerabilities in the existing technology that we have. So in short, have a plan. It's easier to reach your destination if you know where you're going. And thank you, everybody.
Perfect. Thanks, Chad. Some questions have come in, and we'll go ahead and start running through those. If there are any additional questions, feel free to add those into the Zoom control panel. So first question, as an employer, how do I combat employment fraud?
Employment fraud from the perspective of basically employees just abusing or misusing your time. It's going to be difficult. The only way you can do this is through, really, from a technology standpoint, you need to do this through some sort of monitoring and keeping metrics for what they're doing and how they're doing it. Ideally, you would just do this through standard management, not necessarily looking at their time, but their productivity and their output. But it's going to be a lot different if you don't have the technology platforms in place to actually be able to look at and measure output. So that's something that everybody's struggling with.
So, question from the same individual, what would you recommend for investigating wage/hour fraud cases?
That's going to depend on what they're working on. But, if a remote workforce that's having issues with wage and hour, you're going to need to look at their activity. I mentioned there are forensic timelines that can be run that will rebuild the activity from a user from when they log on in the morning, what they do throughout the day, and when they power off in the evening. So if they are hourly employees and you are paying them for that hour, then you want to look at that. And things like opening a web browser and watching Zoom or watching Netflix, for 2 hours throughout the day, while they might have email open in the background is certainly something that's going to come up from a review of those devices.
Okay. Next question. Do you have a recommendation for preservation of text messages, Instagram, and other smartphone communications?
Text messages are going to reside on the smartphone itself. So you're not going to be able to go to the carrier, AT&T or Verizon, for example, and get the actual text messages themselves. You might get a record of the to and from of the text messages, but again, things like iMessage or Kik or whatever else the kids are using these days for messaging back and forth aren't being recorded by the provider because it's using data over Wi-Fi, for example, as opposed to an actual SMS messages going through the carrier. So those are on the device. And forensically preserving those devices will capture that information. And if you're using one of the applications that doesn't store a lot of data on the phone, there are ways to go to providers such as like Instagram, and a lot of those social media platforms or chat platforms might have a takeout feature that lets you download a lot of that information from them directly. If not, you have to get creative and find ways to collect it.
Okay. Next one that's come in is, I have a bad leaver situation in my department and that person is the only G Suite super admin. How can I revoke their admin and give to another employee without them knowing?
Yes. This is something that's coming up in businesses a lot. They have one IT person, and that person is the admin throughout their environment. And now you have a situation where you need to investigate your IT administrator, but that's the only person that is the administrator. The answer is you really can't. You should always have more than one administrator on a system for this exact reason. So, social engineering, get creative. Figure out a way to get that IT administrator to give you administrative rights for a period of time to do something, or say you're having your security audited by a third party and they need administrative credentials to get in to audit the security and make sure you're protected and secure, and get another admin account. But going directly to Google, for example, and G Suite, they're going to rely on that administrator. It's going to be very, very difficult to work through Google directly to get those administrative credentials removed from that user and reassigned.
All right, and last question we have. I've already experienced it, but do you have any tips for combating pettiness when trying to work on an investigation or matter?
It depends on the individual, but we certainly have had situations where we've needed to collect mobile phones throughout 2020 when people are working at home, and they just don't want to give them up for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they're doing something on their phones they shouldn't. But working through that, just talking it through with them, having the employer get involved as well is a help. I mean, employers in some cases are able to have a little bit more of a heavy hand to say, your job is on the line if you're not cooperating with this investigation.
All right. Looks like there aren't any more questions and answers. So, Chad, with 3 weeks left in 2020, any final thoughts?
Stay safe and do your best to have a happy and safe holidays.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. A follow-up email with all the materials from today's webinar will arrive in your inbox tomorrow. And if you submitted your Illinois bar number during registration, your CLE attendance certificate will be sent out next week. Thank you again for attending, and we hope you will join us for a ForDiscovery webinar in 2021. Have a good rest of your day.